Recently, I gave a talk at a very excellent local college, and it was about the experiences and divine disclosures reported in the book God and Autobiography. And the professor asked what I thought was a very good question. And I guess you'd take it to be a kind of skeptical question, that I'm saying, well, God told me all these things, and it's a substantial body of divine disclosures, enough to be sort of revelatory, a pretty synoptic picture, large-scale picture of the nature of God, of God's role with us, of the nature of the universe, of the course of history, human and divine destiny, you might say, of what God's been doing in the various cultures and religions all the way back to his prehistoric times. So it's a kind of big picture, but the professor pointed out, there's already an enormous body of what he called ancient wisdom, which I think he meant the various religious traditions, the sacred texts, and their, seers and wise men and women, and saints, and then the philosophical reflections on those that go back to, several hundred years or 1,000 years BC. And they range, all over, and everything you can think about is addressed somewhere in the body of ancient wisdom. And so why would there be a new word needed? Why is it time for God to speak up? And in fact, when God first told me, these were God's words to me. I'd been a lifelong agnostic. God made himself available, started answering my questions, and so I was just in an interesting dialogue with God, didn't know there was going to be a project coming out of this. And then one day God said, I want you to tell my story. Well, the first thing that occurred to me that I ask is, hasn't your story been told already? Of course, growing up in a Christian home and a Christian culture, I meant by that primarily, the Bible. And you read the Bible, that's sort of God's story, isn't it? It's the God's story, at least for a long period of time there, of some thousands of years, up to roughly 0 AD. So why would God's story be needed to be told more? It's been done, and the professor wisely added the other sacred traditions. So if there's anything missing from the version of the story I mentioned, it's over there in these other versions that would be the story of, you might say, what God was doing with the people of India or the people of China or other cultures. And other aspects of human wisdom would come out in these various traditions. So I asked that, why would it need to be told again? Well, God gave me several reasons. God's been very patient with me. I tend to argue that's what philosophers do. And then God is patient and answers my questions. If I argue back, he answers those. And what God told me was that the old religions are kind of losing their force today. I don't remember his exact words. I have them written down. They're in the book, of course. But they're losing the conviction, you might say. They're losing their following. They're losing their vibrancy, their spiritual command on people. And at this point, since I'd been a lifelong agnostic, I didn't know much about the religion scene, you might say. But I, being told this, started looking around, and I did see what God was talking about. We have the phenomenon growing in every generation by generation now of people who are spiritual but not religious. So even those who have a spiritual turn don't find it satisfied by formal religion, institutional religion, the religion of creeds and dogma. That just does not speak to them. And so they're going off on their own. And then I was told there's kind of good news and bad news, that the bad news is they're going off on their own, you might say, directionless. And so while theoretically they should be on a kind of spiritual quest of their own, looking for the ultimate truth, the best way to relate to the divine, they're often just doing something that's sort of flaky psychology or self-indulgent or even sort of magical. And, there's always the temptation of the religious impulse to try to have magic charms and make God dance to our tune, which is a perversion of the right relationship. And so they're often all these things, and sometimes just sort of giving a highfalutin rationalization for what they feel like or how they want to live, for whatever their lifestyle might be. And that's not adequate. But God said the good side of this is that there actually is a renewal of spiritual interest, of spiritual yearning, of spiritual questing. It just is directionless. People don't know which way to go. And so this is a new situation in our time, unlike any situation in the last 2,000 years, for example, and a time for God to speak anew and give us a new word, some new guidance on the new situation. And the other thing happening now that, again, is unlike any previous time in human history, is that we're now, we have what they call globalization. We're now one world community. You go online on your computer, you can equally well converse with people in Hong Kong or Addis Ababa as you can with people in Cleveland or St. Louis. We're all members of one community, and we are aware of each other's work. And if you live and thought and religious traditions and spiritual attitudes, and if you live in America especially, we're so very pluralistic a country and have people here from all over the world. One scholar, Ben Wattenberg, called us the first international nation because, we just have everything here, and from cuisine to religion. And so it's not uncommon anymore to find my wife and I went to a Hindu mandir recently that's in nearby New Jersey. There are mosques. There are, of course, Christians and Jews and Christians of various sects and Sikhs and, anything you want to name, you've got it in America. And so this is the new world. And we read each other. And I'll notice on Facebook friends, some, for example, who are very, very Christian in their beliefs and so forth. I'll see them then quoting the Tao Te Ching or the Muslim poet, now I'm forgetting the name, Rami, is that the right name? Anyway, you probably know who I'm talking about. But I don't know why the name escapes me. Anyway, you'll see them quoting bits of spiritual literature. Everybody quotes Gandhi, for example, and Gandhi himself was a Hindu who had a great appreciation for all the religions of the world and thought we should just be learning from each other and getting along and not be so dogmatic and fighting about it. And anyway, this is a new situation now, and none of the bits of ancient wisdom, the ancient texts, those were texts written at a very different time, where the human situation, the human problematic, you might call it, the challenges people faced, the worries they had, were very different from today. And so, should God speak up again? Well, unless you think God has retired and moved to Florida, in other words, that he's kind of gone out of business. You have those going out of business sales, we're retiring, closing up shop, moving to Florida. Unless you think that's what God did, which doesn't make much sense to me, then why wouldn't God speak up again and speak up again through whoever happened to be available? I always feel kind of embarrassed to be running around saying, oh, God talks to me and he told me all this stuff, and it kind of amounts to sort of a full-bodied revelation. But, actually, if you read the Bible, you notice God's always picking unlikely characters, and they often balk that they aren't qualified, and that's part of how Revelation works, I guess. So anyway, if you do look at God in Autobiography, as told to a philosopher, I added that subtitle because we don't have God on a tape recording. We have God talking to a philosopher, and we have therefore a philosopher's questions as well as questions, I had as a human being. But anyway, if you do look at God in Autobiography as told to a philosopher, I would love to hear from you. You can post something on our website, And or I guess where this YouTube is, you can make comments, and I try to answer them. So, because I really appreciate hearing from people, and to me, everybody has a spiritual story, even the atheists do, and I find that totally fascinating, and try to be helpful if there's anything I can say that would be helpful. So, meanwhile, you all be well, and take care of yourselves. If this speaks to you, please subscribe and like, and share it with your friends. It might be just what they need to hear today.